from Saruwatari Xtreme. It's been one heck of a wild ride at the ranch. Everything is going completely crazy, but I was able to squeeze in a run in the Murci, which of course, as all of you know, just makes my day. And above that, I've been able to spend some time late at night when Drew, the prison guard, allows me to work on the X oil tank. She is the constant reminder that I must spend time with my family and have some sort of balance, and I'm sure, as all of you that are married, and especially those with little ones, know how that goes. So, keeping all the powers at bay, we'll take a look at how the X oil tank is going. Surprisingly, working on the X oil tank has been quite enjoyable, but for a different reason. Not because I'm working on the X, but because it's teamwork between my dad and I, where he does the mock-up and design, which his skill set is much better than my own, and I do the fab work, and we kind of work together. It's kind of interesting because it's a different dynamic than that of the farm. The farm always has issues that we always have to work on, and they are just really miserable. So it could be a different level of degree, but that's been a lot of fun, more than I thought it would be. So we're kind of working on that, and then also we'll take a look at something with the Murci that may apply to you and your projects. And I'm talking about weight savings. As some of you know, my background is in drag racing and always trying to save weight for that ET in mile per hour. But it really applies to everything I do, and I pretty much thought it was in most forms of racing. However, my good buddy Christian told me that in drifting in his car, he just really doesn't pay attention to weight. It's not really a factor as much as I would think, so kind of interesting. But in all my projects in my street cars, I always want to try and save weight anywhere I can. The key for me to making a good custom part is having a good mock-up part, and that of course is where my dad comes in, because this being the exact dimension allows me to build my template that I'll use to build the pattern to cut out of aluminum. Now, just to give you a quick idea, I've already done the drawing, but you can kind of see how it lines up there. Everything's marked. Now, from the original drawing, then I was able to make the modifications from dimensions I saw actually in the car, and then turn the piece and continue on with the pattern itself. That's how I came up with it. So if you're building your own part, it's nice to build a mock-up, then you can actually use that for your dimensions. Get some nice light-duty board to work with. That way it's not a total pain when you're going to build it. You can make your modifications on here. And for me, I know probably all of you can build perfect parts, but nothing ever comes out the same. Even if it's digitized, or my experience with everything else with models, 3D models, it never is exactly how I planned. So there's always some finessing that has to be done. Now, as far as once we cut this pattern out, then we can use the sheet of aluminum to mark it up, and everyone has their own way. That's a great thing about fab work. I mean, you can do different cuts with shears. People use cutting wheels, tin snips. It's basically whatever works best for you is what I recommend doing. With the clip-on, that is the true test. And man, my dad did a really good job on the mock-up tank. We had to guess everything dimensionally, so when he put it together, you just never know. You know, you're hoping everything's gonna fit, and everything fit perfectly. He cleared everywhere on the first try, which is why he does the mock-ups and I do the fabrication work. So the good thing is that everything looks good, and then from there we just take the adjustments you want to make. So we can take a look inside there. We've got plenty of clearance. We actually have enough room to raise the lid an inch, and with the mock-up we're going to bring the back of the tank back about a ½ an inch, and we have that accommodation since we changed the orientation of the blow-off valve and altered the charge pipe. It's difficult to see down below, but I'll basically explain. We're trying from the front of the tank downwards to gain more capacity and also get the downward gravity effect flow to the pickup for the pump. The problem is that the steering shaft's in the way. So the current plan is to fab it up and then use a half pipe or a portion of a pipe of aluminum to recess into the tank to allow for the steering shaft. That will give us the most capacity to keep our fingers crossed that we won't starve for oil. But that's where we'll go from here. Okay, the templates are all done, but there are a few things that I want to show you that could possibly help you. The first is, if you take a look at the template, you could see that these are the lines originally from the cardboard box. And what I figured out is it looked like between the back of the tank and the intercooler pipe, I could actually move the tank back a ½ inch. So I made that adjustment on the pattern. Then also on the top side versus the clip, it looked like I had an extra inch. So I added that here. Now going back towards the back of the tank, I realized that I could drop down just above the steering shaft about 1.5 inches. So all these were made and they will be adjusted on the aluminum. That way the final product will have it and we didn't have to spend hours adjusting the mock-up. So that's something that might help you. Another thing to remember is that nothing comes out perfect, of course, because it's a cardboard box. So usually I split the difference, but when in doubt, remember that once you cut, that material is gone. So you're better off leaving extra material than shorting yourself. I was able to find a sheet of aluminum in inventory that I can use for the construction of the tank, which is great, so I don't have to spend time going to look for material or sending my dad to go look for material. But I just want to point something out, and that is in this pattern right here, the reason why this is taped is because I made a mistake and I was short that ½ inch. So you can see that I have several lines here that dictate what I'm trying to do and modifications. So I'm real clear to always X off where I'm not supposed to be to try and minimize mistakes. But material and especially time is a big loss if there's something off. So how I did it was I took the original box and I had mocked it up like this. And when I had mocked it up, I realized that that side was short, which made me question what I had done. So as you could see, everything mates up clearly now, but I was short on this side and that was my mistake. So I taped on an extra piece of material and recut the pattern. So now I'll look for the clean edge, which is this side, and of course it's squared off here, which is the best to mark with the patterns to start to make it to the shear. Okay, so the first pattern has been locked down and I drew the separation line on the piece of aluminum, so I'm set to go. Since the shear is upstairs, I'll be taking the whole material up there with me. So what I will do is I will also mark the second piece. But oftentimes, no matter how careful I am, the shear does not cut exactly where it's supposed to. So I'm going to mark it here in the hopes that I'm right on the line, and if I'm not, I'll have to bring it back down and readjust this pattern. But if I'm going to be off, as usual, I want to have extra material because I can just knock it down real quick with this sander, die grinder. And one thing I will mention is patterns, especially for those building custom parts. Save them because you never know when you have to build another one. This is my shear, press, brake, and roller. And if you want to do fab work, this is well worth the money. It just makes life a lot easier. If you have the means, I would recommend it. A lot of my fab work actually I do by hand, and I did it all by hand before I got this, but imagine the time saved just sticking it into the shear, pulling the handle, you get a nice clean cut versus trying to use either a cutting wheel or some other tool. I mean, it can be done, I've done it, but this just saves you a ton of time. So something you might keep in mind. But that's what I did is I sheared off these pieces right here. And then there was a piece left here, obviously, because I couldn't get in at that angle and I had to finish it off by hand. But it probably cut my time, and against doing it all by hand, less than half the time using the bend, brake, and shear. I've cut the two pieces to make the outer frame of the tank. Unfortunately, on this piece, I got a little bit too aggressive with the shear. So my point of the bend is a little bit further back than I'd like, but you just never know till you put it all together. And on this set, I couldn't use the shear, so I'll have to do it by hand. And then I'll start doing the fit work. One thing also to pay attention is of orientation. So obviously you can see here another mistake I made was this is the side I want to use for the outside of the tank, but unfortunately in my mind I thought that I should make the bend here. So luckily I caught it before because I want to use this side for the inside of the tank. So I'll flip it, make my mark, and bends that way. It'll just change where the wells are. But other than that, I'm just glad I caught it. grinding and shaping the pieces. So now all that's left is to mark the line where to make the bend and take them to the bender. I've got the material lined up, so now I will go ahead and proceed to make the bend. All right, I've finalized the bends on both of my parts here, and I was able to test fit them on the model. With the increase in size and the modifications, everything fits together just right. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use Gorilla Tape to tape this together, to mock it up, to actually put it in the car. I highly recommend, if you have the time, that you should do it, because almost always, even though it's perfect out here, it just doesn't seem to fit right in the car. Well, that was well worth the time and energy, because even though everything mocked up right on the bench, it did not fit right in the car. In the back corner, near the intake tubes, I lost all my clearance. So what I had to do was take it apart and use the shear to cut off actually an extra inch. And with an inch off the back side, and it mocked up, then I was able to get the 1/4 inch back that I needed. Everything else seems to look good, but if I had welded that up, and then I had to cut everything out again, it would have costed me a ton of time in comparison to the time I spent mocking everything up. Just something to think about. I finished welding up the framework. I'm happy with the way everything came out. You can take a quick look at it there. You can see we're ready to give it a test shot, see how it's gonna go. Still have quite a ways to go on this, but at least everything is moving forward. I'm sure all of you hear it time and time again, weight is the enemy in any of these performance cars. And there are so many benefits to losing weight, I'm not even gonna bore you to go through them because most of you already know that. But for me specifically, it's just the way the car feels. And I know a lot of you know what I'm talking about. And of course, some of it's up here as well. So one thing that's always interested me is lithium-ion batteries, but the technology's always been a little bit beyond me because lead acid seemed to be kind of the way to go as far as reliability. Many of you heard the stories, you have to change the charging rate, alternators, special chargers. All these things are a bit difficult to handle, just for a car that doesn't use very often. McLaren, a lot of other vehicles, I think even some of the M series run lithium ions, Porsche runs them, but they all work differently. So in a Porsche, you're in good shape because it actually has the voltage regulation internal in the battery. So you can use one of those. Unfortunately, a lot of those batteries that I looked at weren't strong enough to run my naturally aspirated V12s. But there's a company called Anti-Gravity Batteries. And I am not an expert in lithium-ion batteries, but the cool thing about them is that their batteries do not require you to change the alternator. You still need to use a special trickle charger. And believe me, I have heard stories from many reliable sources that their lithium-ion batteries have blown up because they haven't followed the directions precisely. So seeing that this is beyond my expertise, the people at Anti-Gravity Batteries were nice enough to give me some quick information on what I'm looking at. So this, of course, is for the Murci, which I'm very excited about. As you can see, quite the difference. Now, to know for sure, I need to get that battery out and then weigh them so I can give you the exact number so we can check it out. And then you can see if it's worth it to you. I've already done a video once on changing the battery, but I didn't actually do it. So I'll just run through it real quick, pull this out, then we can check this out. Just a quick note on this battery. It's got something unique on it I've never seen before, and that is it also comes with 2 key fobs. If the battery goes dead, you can use your key fob, and it has an emergency voltage supply to start the car if you get in a jam. The other thing is that this battery runs on what's called prismatic cells. If you look into a lot of lithium-ion batteries, you'll see that they don't because there's a cheaper process, but it does not allow you as much flexibility in charging. And that, to my understanding, is one of the main reasons this battery can be used without modifying the charging system on your car. So I'm gonna look at, let's get into it. To access the battery, all you'll need to do is remove the duct to cool the manifolds. Just use a 10mm socket up on top. There's Torx on the top and bottom, and use one 10mm socket to pull this bolt, and you're good to go. So I didn't remember everything, and I will tell you, once I got in there and pulled the hold down off with the bolt, it was still an amazing fight with that battery, and it is so heavy. So I removed this piece which basically comes in from the back side. Use the 13mm socket and you pull out the 2 bolts. Taking this piece off makes life a lot easier because now the battery can just slide out the back. I was able to get the Murci battery out, and to my surprise, the battery was an H6. Now, the reason why that surprises me is anti-gravity thought that the car would use an H7. A lot of research I saw online was H8, and of course, when I pulled it out, it was an H6. So again, as we always talk about, don't believe everything you read on the internet. So the problem being is I had the wrong battery. That's why my project got delayed a little bit, but the folks at Anti-Gravity were nice enough to call tag that original battery and send me out a new one. So talking about the batteries, you might want to check your car, especially if it's a Murci, because I can't tell you for sure. This could have been the case of the whole Italian car thing, but I don't know for sure. Now, one thing to think about is the batteries have many different options for amps per hour. I went with the 60 amp per hour because the Murci sits a lot, and that way I have the best battery in it. But also, the trade-off is I wouldn't be able to lose as much weight. If you run the battery that runs less amps per hour, you will have a better weight savings. So you can see right here that we have the batteries all set to go on the scales, and we can come right over here and take a look at the computer to see what it's showing. And what we see is left front, which is the lithium-ion anti-gravity battery, at 19 pounds versus 45 pounds for the interstate flooded lead acid. I like the whole battery option weight savings deal because it's easy, especially if the battery size case is the same, no modifications, no fab work. These are all great things. And those of you that try and lose weight on your own projects know that to lose 26 pounds through carbon fiber, tie, it is going to cost a whole lot more than that. So in my opinion, it is an easy, cost-effective means of losing some weight. Now, after changing it to that anti-gravity battery, man, that made a huge difference. I can completely feel it, and I'm much faster now. No, I'm just kidding. Not really. I do feel a bit of a difference, especially in the corners, a little bit on acceleration, but it also could all be up here. But to me, that's just as important, as I've said, about the driving experience. Obviously now I'm not going to go out and drag race other cars or do crazy things. The thing about weight savings is it's all about the cumulative effect. So if you keep working on it and you're able to save a lot or quite a bit, you will definitely feel a difference. And case in point being, a lot of you know that oftentimes I'll ride alone or with Drew. And a good reason for that is Drew doesn't weigh very much. And it also doesn't hurt that she's easy on the eyes. When I do have friends in the vehicle that are much bigger than me, it's great, it's a fun time, but I can feel the difference. And I know all of you can too. So, save weight. If you're gonna have a passenger, find someone who's very skinny, who doesn't weigh much. That's my advice. On that happy note, I'll see you next time.